Back and better than ever, sort of. Welcome back to Iceman and Coach, everybody. It is the end of May. We seem to be a monthly podcast now, but you know what? It's okay because we bring the fire every single time. I'm the Iceman, Matt Frates. That is the coach, Brad Powell. Brad, how you doing, buddy, outside of the offline issues that we just had?
Iceman, I'm doing well, man. And you said monthly podcast, but it has been that recently, but it's sort of let's be honest, like we're out of like peak sports time. I know that there's plenty going on and there's plenty to talk about, which is outstanding, but we're both, you're coaching your son's t-ball team. I'm in the softball here with our daughters, so it's been super busy, man. We talked about the puppy. You got a puppy. I got a puppy and 2 young kids, and that's enough for most people. And then obviously you throw in just coaching softball and some other just whatever day-to-day duties on top of it, and it becomes difficult to squeeze this stuff in sometimes.
I'll tell you exactly what it is. We're resting on our laurels because last year at this time, we were trying to build the channel, grinding every single week. Actually, I would contend, and maybe you disagree, that we were at a peak last year at this time. We were talking about anything and everything. We were catching strays left and right, talking about Messi, talking about the A's, just all these, Oklahoma softball, all these people coming here because they were hoping for uninformed takes. And a lot of them stayed. And so now that we have built this channel up to where it is now, why even need to grind anymore? We are where we need to be. Let's set up that laurels hammock and let's just chill out.
Yeah. I wish that was maybe the reason why, I guess. But no, you're right. Last year at this time, we were getting after it and we were hitting all sorts of weird stuff, but it was a lot of fun. And we carried that momentum into the football season and obviously through college basketball, the addition of Braves talk on top of it. And I don't know, I mean, maybe we needed sort of a breather to regroup. And I'm confident that we are going to get back on track.
We did a lot
the summer, so
we did a lot, man, in the last year. Like let's be perfectly honest, peek behind the curtain a little bit, is we started this channel and we went basically right into it. I mean, we went fully live basically sometime during football season last year, and we had a great time doing that. You and I both copped to the fact that we were tired after football season because we had never really covered anything with that kind of bravado, with that kind of enthusiasm. And it's tough. I mean, if you think about this, right? Think about the fact that every Friday night, most people, even if they have kids, are looking forward to relaxing. And you and I, every Friday night during football season, we're on that live feed with all the people that showed up. And that takes dedication. It takes sacrifice. And honestly, it's draining after a while. And so I think we do deserve a break because let's face it, we put in a lot of hard work. And while, yes, it is true that if you take time away, your loyal listeners become not so loyal. But at the same time, sports is content that will continue to feed into this show. And this show will be a show for as long as we want it to be, not as long as the topic allows us to be.
Yeah. And, we've kind of explained the fact that this is a labor of love, right? We don't have, we want to deliver a good quality product that people enjoy consuming. But I think, on top of that, we want to make sure that we're enjoying doing it, and we are. And we don't ever want it to become something that feels like a job or a nuisance to have to make time for. And sometimes that's going to lead to, stretches like we've had lately with just long breaks between shows. And, I think we're good with it, man. And I think we're moving in the right direction. And like I said, I have no doubt that we're gonna get things rolling again here this summer. We're gonna head into the fall and football season with full steam ahead.
I'm looking forward to the month of June because T-ball will be over, so I will have a little bit more of my mental headspace back. Remember last year when I went to visit the in-laws for a couple weeks and we did some shows and I was remote and we had a good time doing that? That was the Donuts episode. I'm looking forward to getting more of that kind of content on this show. Anybody who is looking for a debate about what you would call a mini donut or whatever. But to be just perfectly honest and transparent, yeah, the last 2 months have been crazy. But I hope that somewhere in our fan base, there is a conspiracy theory that after we went to Charlotte together, we stopped liking each other. And so the show has become further and further apart in terms of episodes. So let's just put that out there into the old Iceman and Coach space.
No, no, it's funny. I was thinking about that, man. I was like, it's just timing, right? Timing of what's happening in our lives. And then on top of that, I've sort of in my head theorized that, obviously we hadn't met in person until we went to Charlotte. And at that point, obviously we spent 4 days basically, just the two of us, and then obviously, with the general public when we were at the arena. So it's like we got to know each other pretty well. And I think that it's like once you get to know somebody, like you understand that like when someone becomes a really, really good friend and you have that bond with somebody, you just know that like we're good, right? Like life, if life happens, things get busy, like we're good. Like there's, because we know each other well, and there's no like wondering if you offended somebody or wondering if like, I don't know, any of that goofy stuff that comes up sometimes. It's just like, you're really good friends, your best friends. Like you always know that it could be an hour, a week, a month, a year, however long in between. And when you pick back up, it's just like not a moment's gone by, right? And I just think we're at that point.
We are at that point because we shared the kind of cab ride that we shared back from the arena. And when you
That's
do
true.
that, you become ride or die for life. And I think
We were in
that's
the
what
trenches
cemented.
together.
Oh, trenches is and the thing is this show is not really a family show like we've joked about that before, but the conversation that took place in that cab ride will never ever be on all of this
No,
because it's
no, not
just
a
a little
chance.
too crazy. But one thing that wasn't on the docket for today, and that's the word I'm using, is one of the reasons that I was busy a couple weeks ago and we wanted to talk about this is I actually had jury duty. And I know I kind of was regaling you as we're going along, but I ended up becoming a juror on a murder trial, which add that to the bucket list of things you never thought that you would do. And it was quite an eye-opening experience. And I will say that last week it took me a little bit to kind of, I don't know, like come back down from the experience. I know that you were like hoping I could talk more about it, but obviously I couldn't. But just the whole social dynamic of being in a jury of your peers. And I'm like, man, I don't know if this guy thinks that we're his peers because there's just a lot of differences between the person that's on trial and the people that are in this courtroom. And it's like it was an eye-opening and honestly life-changing experience. And I think that I'm glad that I went through it.
I, it's definitely a bucket list type item, right? Something that a lot of people
Is
say,
it?
well, if I ever well, I mean, for some people, probably, and I think a lot of people would say, "Hey, if I ever do get called for jury duty and get selected, I'd like it to be something interesting, at least." And I guess be careful what you wish for, right? Because something that may seem interesting from a distance, once you get immersed in it, and you are faced with some of the things that you were exposed to in that process, it's something that sticks with you for a while, man. Like just different images and descriptions of events that occurred. That's a lot. That's a lot to process because it's not a TV show, right? Everybody sees
No.
this stuff on TV and they think it's so fascinating. This is not a TV show. This is real life. This is someone's life that was taken from them, and the person who did it or allegedly did it is sitting, you know, 10, 15 feet, 20 feet from you. You know what I mean? And you are deciding their fate.
Yes, and not allegedly anymore. It has been confirmed because of the verdict that we came up with. But yeah, and I will tell you that when they're doing their jury selection, one of the questions that they asked was, do you understand that what is going to happen in this courtroom is not like a television show? Which lets me know that the common denominator of people that they have rolling through here for something as serious as this is lower than me, I think, because I'm like, duh. But I realize that probably a lot of people, their only experience with court is what they see on Law and Order or what they see on any other type of show. And so it was eye opening from that perspective. And it kind of, in my opinion, to bring it back to sports a little bit, it kind of gives you a glimpse about what it's like to be on a team, a professional team, because you're not going to like everybody on your professional team, but you're together for a common goal, and that goal is winning. And so while this common goal is much different, you're forced to be with these people. And even if you wouldn't get along with them in your personal life, which thankfully all of the people were amazing. I will say that not one person was terrible. But I always wondered to myself, like, what happens if you're on a team and you don't like that person? That's got to be frustrating.
Oh, it's got to be extremely frustrating, but and I think it differs from maybe the level or whatever. But 'cause I think there comes a point in time where maybe if you're being paid enough money to not care that much, you could overlook certain things at that point in
Sure.
time. But also too, if you're really that disliked by your teammates, you better be a high performer, because if you're not, you're not going to be around for long, because there's the average player is a kind of a dime a dozen, right? You can go find another guy to do what this person does, and he's a locker room favorite. You'd rather have that, because chemistry does matter, and we've talked a lot about that on Braves Talk and things. But chemistry is relevant, and if you have someone that disrupts that, and you have a fractured locker room, it could be extremely detrimental to the results on the field.
Yes, it definitely can. And that's kind of a good segue, I think, because when you talk about team chemistry, if there's one thing that definitely can crumble team chemistry, it's losing. And so I want to trigger warning people here. No, we're not going to talk about abuse or anything like that. But we're going to talk about Caitlin Clark. And we have talked about her before. And we're trigger warning here because it seems like whenever we mention her name, we get a lot of hate coming to this show because she's triggering for one reason or another. But she has made her WNBA debut. I want to bring up something, by the way, before we get into this. It never dawned on me that their season ended in April, and then the WNBA season starts a month later. So between the national championship, getting drafted, and starting in the WNBA, it's like a month. And these kids that are getting drafted to the NBA have from March or April all the way until like October. It's kind of crazy how swift that turnaround is.
Yeah, I was blown away by that, because frankly, I was oblivious to that fact, that the
Me
turnaround
too.
was that quick. And I found it interesting. And you wonder, for someone like a Caitlin Clark or any of these other women that played in the Final Four and down the stretch there, to make that transition, and especially if you are someone of uh, Caitlin Clark's profile and popularity, you have to wonder, man, how much that wears on you mentally, right? And having that expectation hanging over your head, and then just having to physically perform, and feeling, and especially with just the different things that are out there publicly, they try to tune that stuff out, but there's no avoiding um, some of the things that are out there in the different narratives, and that just has to weigh on a person. And I can't imagine some of the struggles that these women go through in that quick turnaround and transition time, especially if there's high expectations attached to them.
There are high expectations for her specifically because here's the other thing too is if you're going to get drafted number 1 overall, you're most likely going to a bad team. And I think that's across the board in any sport. Now there obviously are exceptions to that where a team is number 1 because of a trade or some set of circumstances. The NBA is kind of notorious for this where you kind of get a nested pick, and if you're lucky that team is bad enough where you can get the number 1 pick. So like the Celtics could randomly have the number 1 pick and win the NBA finals the year before. But for the most part, you're getting drafted to a bad team. And I think personally, no matter who the rookie is, even if you're a highly touted rookie, that you have to taper expectations because this person is making a massive jump. Caitlin Clark has been playing against her peers, but you and I both know that she's vastly superior to almost everybody that she played with on that team in Iowa and probably even on the court in general. And now she moves to a professional product, and say what you want about the kind of play and whether it's something that the average fan would watch. But I think you and I could both agree that the level of basketball being played in the WNBA, most of those people are on par with each other in terms of their talent, right? And so she makes that move up. She's not playing against these other teams that have vastly inferior talent. She's now coming into a league that is established, has established stars in terms of players that have been in the league for a while. And I think that it's okay for her to struggle a little bit, but it doesn't seem like she's getting that leeway from some people in this space.
Well, and the media, they
Not
they
helpful.
they're not helpful in this, because they build the narrative, and then they're right there to cut your legs out from under you when things don't go as planned. But I think that you have Caitlin Clark, who went from, and this is no disrespect to her teammates at Iowa or any other teammates she's had along the way, but for probably her entire life as an amateur athlete, she carried whatever team she was on. It was her, and surrounded by an inferior supporting cast, at least comparatively speaking to her abilities.
And that's not saying that
And
those women were bad basketball players.
no,
It's
it's
compare
not.
like everybody compared to her would say, I'm not her, is
Right.
what you're saying.
And yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm not taking any shots or throwing shade at any of her teammates at Iowa or high school or whenever else. But those style of play that she has been involved with was really surrounded around her having to do things and play probably a lot of me basketball in order to get her team to win, and not playing within a team system so much. She's never played with the level of teammates that she currently has. And so I feel like there's, to some degree, she doesn't know how to play team basketball. And her coach was had a press conference here recently. I saw a clip of it, and she said as much. I'm sort of like paraphrasing, but she said something along the lines of that there's some habits they have to break, and that she does some things that she had to do in college that she doesn't have to do them at this level. She doesn't have to force certain things because she has capable teammates who can play at a level that can be supplemental to her, as opposed to her having to, I guess, carry the team. And that's, and really, I want to emphasize, I'm not trying to diminish anybody that she played with. But if you watched even a quarter of Iowa basketball this season, it was very obvious that, she is the one who steered the ship, and they went as she went. So, is it, were the expectations possibly unfair? I mean, yeah, probably. I mean, for anybody, those would be unfair. But the thing is her performance at the college level, set the table for those expectations. And there's going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. And they've played a tough schedule early on, which has received some criticism as well.
That's the part that I want to move on to, because you said it actually, and I think it's true. Okay, so first of all, I think a lot of people have just started watching women's basketball in the last few years. Do you think that's fair?
Yes.
And that's because the college game has seen a rising star. There's been a lot of rising stars. I said that very fluidly, but a lot of rising stars that have become sort of household names. I think even Angel Reese, to an extent, would be a name that people casually have heard of because of who she played for and all this other stuff. So you have all of that happening. And I think a lot of people are now like, okay, let me check out women's basketball, because there are players who I recognize. There are stars in their mind. And I think that people like us know that we're ignorant for the most part to what has come before these moments now in women's basketball. And so we try to talk about it the way that we are appropriately capable of doing. I'm not at least trying to say like, this is definitively true, and you're not trying to do that either. And now you get all these fans who have these expectations, which is fine. But then you have these fans who want her to succeed so badly, which I understand, to the point that they're like, the players need to stop giving her a hard time. And I'm talking about the opposing players. And the league itself should have scheduled her for a soft landing so that she could bring the league up. And I have a lot of feelings on that, because it just is kind of ridiculous as a premise, but I wanted to at least set the stage so that you could talk about it. We'll go back and forth.
So I think we have to start by looking at this and separating Caitlin Clark's basketball playing ability and Caitlin Clark's popularity and marketability as two different things. If you're the WNBA, you need to capitalize on Caitlin Clark's popularity and marketability. It's in the best interest of the entire league and everyone that's a part of the league to utilize her and her marketability to get people in the door, to bring as many eyeballs to the WNBA as you can. Use her as your billboard on the side of the road to get people to take the exit and come check it out. Because, I was trying to think about different things, that are sort of similar to this. Like, think about maybe like Leonardo DiCaprio will get you to the movie theater to see a movie, and then you see one of the supporting actors that maybe you haven't heard of, and you're like, wow, this guy's a really great actor. And then that's going to ultimately elevate that person's profile. And, next thing you know, they're the next A-list actor, and then they become a household name.
Continue with your Caitlin Clark point here.
Yeah. So really what I'm saying is they need to use their marketability to get as many eyeballs on the product as possible. And that's going to raise the profile of the league and everyone in it, tremendously, I think. And like I said, it's not unlike going to the movies because there's an A-list actor you want to see, and next thing you know, you discover a supporting actor that you really like that is going to get you to another movie, and so on. Or think about recruiters. Recruiters go to recruit a star player, and then they see some other players, and they're like, heck, man, these kids can play too. And so I think that you just need to use her as something to get people there, um, to get more eyes on the sport and get more eyes on the people participating. And that's going to elevate the entire league as a whole. But now at the same time, I will say, I understand um, the frustration probably by some of the players who've been in the league, for 10, 15 years and grinding with, in front of 1,500 people, and nobody giving a crap. And then now you have Caitlin Clark coming along, and you've had the media and the general public telling you how great she is and how she's going to dominate and all this stuff. Because I don't know that really any of those things have ever come out of her mouth. I do think that people could maybe draw conclusions or take exception to maybe some of the way that she carries herself during games at times, that could rub some people the wrong way potentially. But it's, I have no problem with being competitive in that sense, and maybe, trying to put her in her place, because I do think that that's not uncommon in any other league either. Like hey, here's the rookie. Let's show them that they're, playing with the big boys or the big girls now.
My problem with it is it attempts to dilute the sport in a sport that a lot of people, I think even yourself included, not to out you here, have said that it's not your type of basketball, that it's not something that gets you to watch. And there are a lot of people who will, but I do wonder if they were to do that by diluting the sport, if it's harder then to get random people to come. I honestly believe that Caitlin Clark's ascension in the league, having to work from this position of, hey, look, these veterans are going to give it to her. And I respect the hell out of that, because you're a competitor. Be competitive. Like, allow these women to be competitive. And if she rises from that, I mean, it's not like she's playing terribly. She's playing fine for, I think, what your expectations would be. But I think that story is better. And the other thing is, and again, I understand the WNBA could benefit from these additional people coming to the sport, but one of the arguments that I heard was nobody's asking Larry Bird to do this. Nobody was asking Magic Johnson to do this, the league to do this for them, or Michael Jordan, or hell, name any Kobe, LeBron, anybody. They all had to start from this position of welcome to the NBA. And I think it's just fine that that's where she's having to start from. And if she is as great as we all think that she is, then guess what? That greatness will come out and the league will benefit regardless.
Well, I think the difference between her and the people you mentioned is that the NBA wasn't a struggling league at that point in time. I mean, the WNBA, and again, my ignorance may be showing here, but I'm fairly certain that the only reason the WNBA it continues to exist is because it's heavily subsidized by the NBA. And if they had to be a self-sustaining entity, they may not exist, just because the market and the viewership just simply isn't there. And that's why I think I would personally have, from a business perspective, if you're looking at this like a businessman, for the WNBA, like, hell yes, you do whatever you have to do to elevate her profile. And if that means, softening the schedule, which the schedule is likely already made before, we talked about the quick turnaround. The schedule was probably in place long before,
way before,
she was ever drafted or part of that, so on and so forth. But, I would have had no problem from a business perspective with them doing things to set her up favorably, to get her off to a fast start, to keep, like I said, keep more eyeballs on it longer. Because I could see some casual fans coming to watch a WNBA game and seeing her struggle and be like, oh, okay, it's just going to be the same old WNBA. And again, and that's no shade. I'm just saying, I think that's what the general public thinks, more often than not. They want to see her be the player she was in college and be the superstar. And if she's not, and she's just another WNBA player, then you've really gained nothing at that point in time.
I think it goes far beyond Caitlin Clark, though. Like, I think the WNBA needing help comes from so many things. And I kind of wonder if the people that are calling for this are the ones that aren't actually showing up. They're not going to the games. They're not watching the games. They're not buying the merch. And that stuff helps. when you support teams in that way financially and with your viewership, it helps. So I think it's all been very fascinating because this woman, no matter where she goes, can't seem to help but have controversy follow her. And honestly, all she's really doing is playing basketball. She's trying to adjust in this league. It's been a tough transition. And look, it's going to take some time. And I think both sides, it's fascinating. As you said, the media loved her, and now all of a sudden they're pointing out all of her flaws. And nobody is your friend in the sports business, probably including us.
You might be right. Although I would argue that when we go after people, it's usually for irrational, stupid reasons.
Yes, to us.
But I think that when it comes to things that people are really um really polarized about, I think that we tend to fall somewhere in the middle. And I think we're there here. Just the same. I think we can kind of see the business side of it, but also we realize that it is a league full of competitors that are there to compete and to win, and she has to rise to the occasion.
She
And
will.
so and I think that she will. And I understand, she's the type of player, she wears her emotions on her sleeve a little bit, and that kind of makes somebody an easy target sometimes. When you can visibly see that maybe you're frustrating someone or getting under their skin. I mean, it's human nature, man. Like it just drives you to you know dig a little deeper. And that's one thing is I think she makes it known when something's bothering her. And that's just gonna, I mean, that's blood in the water.
Yes. Watch out, Caitlin. Brad Powell is coming for you. That
Not
blood
me.
in
I
the
just mean
water.
like to the people she's competing against, man. Like you show any signs of weakness, and a true competitor is gonna, rip your heart out.
But to out you again, and I think this is a good segue to something we were going to talk about later, but the NBA playoffs are now. We've gotten to the conference finals. And is it fair for me to say that you have watched 0 minutes of the NBA playoffs?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And you're not somebody who has hated the NBA for your entire life. Is it fair to say that you once upon a time were an avid NBA watcher?
Avid might be a stretch, but you have to remember, man, like we I grew up
Yes.
in probably the golden age of the NBA with Michael Jordan, the Bulls that won 6 championships, and being in Illinois too. I mean, so that's the proximity. Everybody around here was a Bulls fan, and so I remember watching Michael Jordan, and that was something to be seen. You know what I mean? And so I definitely, once upon a time, certainly watched much more NBA than I have in the last decade.
So to build on what you have said about the fact that like the WNBA type of basketball isn't really something that appeals to you, and you've also now established that the NBA doesn't appeal to you, and you once watched it obviously during the Michael Jordan days. So I kind of wanted to dive into that a little bit because the NBA, I think over the last, I don't know, decade or so has seen kind of a spike in people watching it. And I know that ratings are coming down, honestly, all across the board for everything. But a lot of people would contend that this is the most exciting version of the NBA because of high scoring, a lot of guys that are flashy in the league, a lot of stars right now. And even on the teams that are left, you have a lot of recognizable names and a lot of young recognizable names. So I'm curious about what has happened to the NBA that has kind of turned you into somebody who would rather watch college basketball than the NBA. And I know that for you, it goes even further than that. It's kind of college sports in general.
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I would say this. I feel like the NBA today is a young fans game. I think that culturally, the NBA relates more to young people. Just the I think that the manner in which the players carry themselves off the floor, the style, the fashion's really big in the NBA. The shoes, right? The sneaker game. I know no shade at the OGs, but the sneaker game, is definitely geared more towards the younger crowd. I would say, and I know that. I mean, because they're the people that are out there. Everybody wants to when you're younger, high school. That it's always keep up with the Joneses, right? Have the best shoes, have the best style, and the thing. I mean, think about it. There are some NBA jerseys and uniforms that like they are like cultural like phenomenons, right? I mean, it's like I think that I mean, the NBA itself, being an NBA fan, I feel like in a way is a style. to some degree. And I'm not saying there aren't older fans, but I think it's one of those deals like me with football. I love the game of football. And while the game that's played in the NFL is quite a bit different than the college game, schematically and things like that, I love the game of football, and I can appreciate, 'cause I know that at its roots, it's still the same thing. And I can appreciate that and kind of look beyond some of the, I don't know what you want to call it, some of the drama that comes with the professional world of sports. And I think you kind of maybe lose casuals a little bit in the NBA because if you're not sort of tuned in to the culture and appreciate some of those things, it's easy to be turned off by it. And I just, like I said, I feel like it's sort of this hip, young thing. And maybe I sound so freaking old, man. Like
Yeah,
I'm
you
talking
do.
like that. I know I do,
Ancient.
but like it's just not something that appeals to me. And then of course, let's just talk about the way the game's played, right? I mean, I think it is, yes, it's fast paced. When you talk about comparing it to the college game, obviously I'm a college basketball fan, so let's start with pace of play, right? The NBA tends to have a faster pace of play, more possessions, focusing on transition offense. College games often feature slower, more deliberate play with greater emphasis on half court sets. Skill level in the NBA obviously higher, more athleticism, higher basketball IQ compared to college players. So you're going to have more dynamic and creative plays in the NBA. So I don't, I'm not diminishing that, but I do think it revolves more around like the individual talent as opposed to a team game. I think the talent disparity, even within a team, not just across college basketball, can be so great that you have to function as a team to be successful. Where in the NBA, I mean, how many times we see some of those Cavs teams were bad, man, and like LeBron carried those guys. I mean, the star power in the NBA is a real thing, and then you can have 1 to 2 good players. And obviously, we ended up where you started getting the trios, right, of stars that the team started putting together and kind of taking things to the next level, and it became an arms race. But 3-point shooting, NBA, the NBA places a greater emphasis on 3-point shooting, and I mean, there's really almost no such thing as like a true 5 or a true big man anymore. Like if you can't shoot from distance in the NBA, like there's like no place for you unless you are an absolute specialist. It's something else. Where I think you see different schemes in college that play to the team's strengths, right? I just think college, and it's probably just because college is behind the times. They're not as evolved as the NBA. I'm sure they're working towards getting there, but it's still far enough in the past that it's a little slower, more deliberate game that plays within a system that has to utilize the overall talent of the team to get a win. And I do think because in the NBA, the players have the power, and the college level, at least still currently, the coaches have the power. And so you have coaches that keep their thumb on some of the individualism that we see in the NBA. You don't see that as much in college because it's more controlled, right? I mean, the coaches have a lot of control over what happens within their programs at the college level. Obviously there's a shot clock difference. The NBA has a 24-second, college is at 30. Again, this impacts pace of play, but I think that there's something I like about the team game, right? I've never been like a me guy, always a we before me. And I know that's kind of an outdated philosophy and thought process, but I think that's what makes me appreciate the college game more, because I can't really get into the I don't know. And of course, the old stereotype, they don't play defense in the NBA until the playoffs or until it's a game that means something, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, everybody in the NBA is really good. I'm not diminishing their talent. They're the best in the world at what they do. It's just not for me, man.
It's funny because when I talk to some people about football, right, there's a lot of people who enjoy the professional product more because it's a more polished product. Like my brother-in-law is that way. He appreciates college football, but he can't get behind the sloppiness that you would see, right? I hate to say amateurism at times that you would see in collegiate sports. And even in the NCAA tournament, like you and I saw some really bad shooting performances in the NCAA tournament, but the atmosphere was still great. The games weren't great, but the atmosphere was still great. And I think what collegiate sports brings is sort of an overall atmosphere that's a little bit different. Something that I think more people can get emotionally tied to for one reason or the other. But I think if you love basketball, the NBA is being played. Like I've watched some things here or there, and I've never really been an NBA guy, so it isn't something that would be like, wow, how come you aren't watching anymore? But one thing I noticed is that the fluidity at which they play in the NBA is insane. And when you've seen that, and then you go back and watch some of these college games, you think, wow, like this just, it looks bad. But what fascinates me about you is you love Bradley basketball. Like we started an offshoot podcast because you love Bradley basketball so much. We don't talk about Bradley baseball. We don't talk about Bradley, so whatever, right? It's basketball. And so I'm just surprised that your love of the game, because you do love the game. Like don't trick yourself into thinking that you don't love basketball, because you would not be watching Bradley basketball with the fervency that you watch it with if you didn't love the game.
Yeah, you're probably right, and
I am.
and I
Right.
don't. Yeah, I know that, and I just and maybe I just haven't given it a shot. Maybe I haven't given the NBA enough of a chance in recent years. Maybe that's something I need to do, and maybe it's part of the reason you talk about the fluency. Maybe part of the reason that I have the perception that they don't play defense is just because the players are so damn good offensively that it just looks easy. And
It
so it
does look
appears they're
very
not
easy.
playing. So it appears they're not playing defense.
Also, I love that you said fluency and it was fluidity. So it's like I speak the
Both
language of the NBA. This is
you
great.
do.
I love, yes,
Fluidity, fluency.
whatever.
We're here for
F
both.
this.
F this. It's I don't know, man. Like I'm just
You're
old
old.
school. I'm old and old school when it comes to things like I'm not real hip on the star power stuff, man. The players having the power. And it's not that I'm trying to keep them down or whatever else, but it's like, an NBA coach, is one of the most useless people in
You've been
the
on record.
they are
Eric
one of the
Spoelstra is
most
terrible,
they're
worst.
one of the most expendable parts of an organization, in my opinion.
They change hands more often than people realize.
Yeah.
Like I don't. If you're tuned into the NBA, you know, but I still contend that hockey coaches get fired and rehired more often than NBA coaches, because I think that it just doesn't matter until you find the guy that can click for whatever particular team that you have. But like in the NBA, these guys get hired and fired like pretty quickly.
I would say though that the trick in the NBA, because you have the Phil Jacksons of the world, right, and the Greg Popoviches of the world. I think that what makes those guys so great, and even Steve Kerr, will put him in the conversation. There are others I'm sure I'm forgetting, but these guys manage the personalities on the team so well. Like, and I think that's the most important thing to do in the NBA is if you can manage the egos and the personalities that come along with all this talent and find a way to get them to play together. You're not teaching them how. I mean, these guys all know how to play the game of basketball at an extremely high level. I venture to guess, and again, my ignorance is going to show. I venture to guess it's not so much of an X's and O's thing. It's getting these highly skilled individuals to put their egos aside in certain cases and find a way to play together. And I know I just said that they don't play together, or at least that's my perception. But I think that's what makes these great coaches so masterful, because I think it's a hard thing to do.
I know what
I
you
think
mean.
it's a hard thing to do. So when you get the Phil Jacksons of the world, they can take a Dennis Rodman and a Michael Jordan and a Scottie Pippen, and get these guys to play together, and win at the level that they won. It's impressive,
It
and it's
helped
not
that Phil let him go to Vegas and then come back.
sure.
As
But the thing
defender.
is being having because that's completely against what any conventional thinking would tell you to do.
Everything.
And so, but to know your team and to know these individuals and their personalities so well that that like this is just what has to be done, and you're willing to do that. You're willing to push those buttons, and not everyone's got. Now, granted, Phil Jackson kind of had he had some rings at that point in time, so not too many people were questioning him.
No.
But outside of Jerry Krause, maybe, but that's a whole other story. It is. I think it's way more of a managing people thing than it is an X's and O's strategy thing. I'm not saying that doesn't play a part. I'm certain that it does, but having the ability to manage all those egos and personalities, I think is the golden ticket to success in the NBA. And there have not been that many people that do it at a high level. for a
And
long time.
honestly, I think that it's becoming the norm everywhere because let's talk about another trigger warning. Coach Prime triggers a lot of people. But this offseason has been fascinating, right? Because last year, I think it was fair that many of us gave him a pass for a poor performance in terms of wins and losses on the field. And you know what he's coming with, you know what he's all about. This offseason has been particularly interesting, and I know you're more into the X space than I am, but he's kind of been going at some of these people pretty hard for a guy that only won 4 games. And I think that Dion is the kind of guy who is more of the managed personality type than the X's and O's type. I think that's his strength. He's a motivator in terms of being a coach. But I'm a little worried, man, because I don't get any sense of humility as we head into this next season. The schedule comes out, and I looked at it and thought, can they squeak 6 wins out of this? I thought it was going to be easier. It looks like it might not be. And I'm kind of getting to this point with him where I'm like, ooh, how many games in is the shtick going to become old?
So I want everyone to realize I recognize the thoughts that are going to go through most of your heads here in a few moments after what I've said over
Oh,
the
no.
last 10 minutes in relation to the NBA. I personally appreciate Coach Prime's charismatic personality, outspokenness, unique approach to coaching, and I believe it brings attention, excitement to the sport.
I do
In a
too.
world where we've had a lot of, basically, let's be honest, like
Sabins.
stuffy old grumpy white men, right? And it's not. It is refreshing to see it done a different way. On the other hand, though, I think his brashness, self promotion, and unorthodox methods, they are worthy of criticism, especially if the wins do not come. Then that's just going to make those voices even louder and louder. And I know a lot of people view his actions as, attention seeking or disrespectful to the traditional norms of coaching and sportsmanship. But I don't know, opinions on his shtick are they're subjective, right? And
They
they can
are.
vary depending on your individual perspective or preferences. And it's funny because I'm kind of, like I said, I don't like this sort of thing out of players in the NBA, but I'm telling you that I do like it out of Coach Prime in this situation. I think that maybe what I'm saying is I want to see things get shaken up in the NCAA, the college coaching ranks, by somebody like a Coach Prime. I think it opens some doors, especially if he can show that this style is going to turn into wins. I think it can open some doors and opportunities for people, other coaches in the future. And, and I'm saying that I think that, that's what turns me off to the NBA. So I recognize the, hypocrisy or whatever you want to call it that exists there. But, I know some find his approach entertaining, engaging, and others find it controversial and off-putting, and it's polarizing. And we've talked about before, man, polarizing, that is what sells, period.
I think the main difference in my head is that Dion is selling a program that people don't have to go to. There's not the same, the money is not the same. When you're when you're an NBA coach, you're not really recruiting guys to come play for you. I mean, there is an element to that. The money is doing that. The city is doing that. The situation, right? Is a team ready to win now? And I don't think that all of that comes into play when Coach Prime is recruiting players. And I think that he has to be a little bit different to shake things up. This is the NIL world now, and people are looking to get their bag, and say what you want about that. I think the old guard of like the Sabins and what have you, they were kind of stuffy. They were great, but they were stuffy. So it is refreshing in a way. I think it's interesting, though, because you have 2 guys that are kind of the same, and Dave from Political Football made this point. Dabo and Coach Prime really aren't that much different in how they approach things. And but they have the opposite approach in one of them, Dabo, isn't going to use the transfer portal, has seen Clemson start to go this way. And the other one seems like he only wants to do transfer portal, doesn't really do visits in homes, and we'll see what happens. He's in year 2. And I think there are differences in that regard when it comes to that. Because like when you're an NBA player, you are there because they have paid you a lot of money to be there and you're a superstar. And so it is about you. The team has made it about you by signing you to this contract, by signing you to an extension, making you the face of the franchise. It's a little different in college because, as you said, you have to be on a team. And so I think that when you're a recruiter, it's a little bit different than when you're like a player that's on a team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And one thing I do appreciate this as a coach, like the coach in me kind of smiles at this stuff because there's many times over a coach's career, especially in the world of social media, there's nothing that stops these players from going on social media and saying whatever they want
Yes.
about coaches, other players, whatever else. And more often than not, it goes without any consequences at all. And most coaches are forced to basically remain silent and don't necessarily have the ability to defend themselves, at least not publicly. And it's one of those things that sort of gets handled maybe by the administration, but most administrations don't want to touch that stuff with a 10-foot pole, so on and so forth. And so I do think it's kind of cool to see Coach Prime just like he's just taking it right back to them. You know what I mean? Like, he is utilizing social media and with the same freedom that they are. And I'm sure that it's got to, I can't imagine what Colorado's athletic director or president
It's what they paid
thinks
for.
when they see this stuff. But you're right. You're 100% right there. They shouldn't be surprised.
No.
They knew what they were getting. It's not like he sold you one thing and he's something else. I think you're getting exactly what you thought you were going to get. And no one's going to give a shit if the guy wins. If he can get things going and win football games, no one's going to care. And we've been big Coach Prime supporters, and I still am. But like, it's probably just think about how the people that find it insufferable now, just think about how bad it's going to be when they're winning, if they're winning. You know what I mean?
UB.
It's just going to be worse.
Yes.
All this stuff. I mean, just take it and multiply it by 100, and that's what you're going to be getting. And because they've got the swagger, right? And if they have the swagger when they're winning 3 games or whatever they won, imagine what it's going to be, if they're going to a bowl game or if they're competing for what's going to be, I guess, a Big 12 championship in the future. So I'm not saying they're going to do that, but if that happens, hold on to your hats, folks.
Oh, it'll be a lot of fun. And I think you and I can both support him, want him to do well, but also point out the fact that wins are what gets you continued employment in sports, and especially in college sports. But I will say this about Coach Prime. He has made the university probably enough money to what they already paid him, because last year they had sellouts at home. When's the last time they had a sellout at home in any capacity? So he brought eyeballs. He got the media there. He did a lot for that university already. Now, if he can bring the wins with it, all this other stuff is fine. Like, that's what happens. We're tired of it when he's not winning. We'll be fine with it when he is winning. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is. But all of these people, in some form or fashion, whether it's Caitlin Clark or whether it's Coach Prime, they all have some kind of like personality to them. And I think for the most part, a sport that is not known for personality is golf. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say so. It's a very it's traditionally, right, a white collar sport.
Yes.
It's very buttoned up and stuffy. I think it's evolved a lot, but traditionally it's a very stuffy country club sport.
Yes. And most winners, I dare say, are mostly boring. Like, they are golfers. It's an individual sport that you have to dedicate. I mean, you have to dedicate in other sports, but in individual sports, especially like golf, you have to dedicate basically your entire life to being good, which is why you and I don't play golf all that often. We usually drive the cart around because we do not dedicate, so we're not that great. Last time we talked about Scottie Scheffler, he was having a time. He'd won the Masters, won the tournament after. I think he's won like 4 out of the last 5 tournaments or something like that. His wife had a baby, right? It's just like the greatest life ever for Scottie Scheffler. And a lot of people said that his greatness was boring. And that's fine, because golf, again, as we said, inherently can be boring. And then the PGA happened this past weekend in Louisville. And we don't have much to add to what everybody already knows, but I just want to say it out loud. Scottie Scheffler was arrested before one of the rounds. I think it was the second round of the PGA championship in Louisville. And I don't know. Like, I don't want to be hyperbolic about it, but like, it was crazy. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, definitely crazy. Obviously, somebody lost their life in an accident, which led to like some traffic being delayed and rerouted. Obviously, I haven't dug deep into the facts as the same with most things that I speak about on this show.
Perfect.
And I think there were probably some missteps on both sides of the situation. It sounds like things probably could have been handled differently by both parties and diffused before they got to the point that they did. It's unfortunate that that's not what happened. And I think there's blame to kind of be shared in the situation. And again, that's me from like a 30,000-foot view of the things that I've heard. Um, and what one part that's kind of funny about it is, so he gets arrested, he gets taken to jail. They literally like delay the tournament so that
Yes.
he can make his tee time, and then he gets a police escort from jail back to the golf course. It's like it's just such a weird turn of events. Um,
So strange.
yeah, very, very strange. And I mean, he's said all the right things pretty much like after the fact. But I also hear like it's not going away.
No.
And I don't think it should. He should not be let off the hook. If he broke laws, he should be, held responsible for breaking those laws. He shouldn't be treated any differently than anyone else in that situation. Then did you see there was like, and I don't know how true this is, but apparently there was like quotes from like some other person that was like an inmate in the jail that was there with him. And it was like a quote from like him quoting what like Scheffler was saying while he was in jail. Like publicly Scheffler said all these things about like how he loves the police force and happy, very proud and happy that we have such a effective and passionate police force, so on and so forth. And this person like quoted saying that he was in there saying he got screwed over and this is bullshit and everything
Wouldn't
else.
you? Like, if you
Oh,
were in that situation, we'd all say the same thing. We're not going to go NWA's F the police, but I think we're going to be like, what the hell just happened? Like, it was a strange turn of events, but it's great because in today's world, something like this happens and he almost becomes like elevated as a result because you got all these memes out there, you got all these videos that people are putting songs on, walking in, excuse me, Scottie Scheffler walking into the PGA. What's crazy though is that day he shoots 5 under, which is just a testament to his talent. And things fell off on Saturday. A lot of people said that maybe finally the weight of everything came to him. Apparently, he had spoken to his lawyer that morning, so I get it. But it's just crazy because golf is so mental. Everything that you do has to be so on point all the time. Like, I don't know if you watch golf a lot, but we do a lot. And when they show the slow motion of a guy's swing, and it's like, oh, look at this right here. If this changes 1 degree, this basically throws everything off. And to be in that mental headspace has got to be tough. It has got to be hard regardless. And to go then into round two after having been arrested early that morning, it's fascinating to think about what was going through his head as he's playing this game. I have no idea how he even shot even par, let alone 5 under that day.
yeah, golf's brutal in that way. It's very mental. And obviously you have to physically be able to do the things necessary to hit good shots. But there's no quick escape if things are going south. I mean, you can't just like walk off the golf course. If you're 4 holes in and you're off to a rough start, guess what, man? Like you still have to finish, the last 14. You're not going to be able to walk off the course or quit. There's no getting put out of your misery or whatever. I mean, and the thing is, there's no one else to blame but you. I mean, I guess you can scream at your caddy if you want, which I always think it's entertaining when that happens, or when they're mic'd up and you hear like them arguing about what club to use and stuff.
Because it sounds so ridiculous.
Sure. I mean, I almost feel like I'd feel more pressure being a caddy than the actual player.
Oh, it's insane.
Because like you're making decisions that are like impacting someone else's performance and their income. I mean, and yours too, I guess, but like specifically theirs and the way they're perceived. And I mean, there's so much tied to it. I think that's tough.
Well, Scheffler didn't have his regular caddy on Saturday and was like 2 over. So how do you feel if you're that guy?
Yeah, that'd be rough. Yeah, being a substitute caddy, I think, would be tough.
Basically cost him the tournament because like if he had continued playing the way he'd played every other day, he probably would have been in contention, if not winning. The scores in that tournament were insane. I think the winner was like -20, which is nuts. Like I can remember golf not being quite that way, but golf has just become so different with technology, nutrition, everything. It's a lot more entertaining to watch. These guys are able to do things that astound me on the golf course. But the caddies, they got a tough road. But hey, when you are Scottie Scheffler's caddy and you're winning 10% every time he wins, good for you.
Absolutely. I got to mention this, because we talked about golf being like a white collar country club sport. So you can only imagine how I feel the times that me and my dad do get out to golf, and we're out there on the golf course and he's wearing his jean shorts
Oh,
on the
excellent. I hope
golf
they have
course.
pockets too. Like, do
Oh,
they have
absolutely.
cargo
No, they're
jean
not like
shirt?
cargo pockets. No, just
Daisy Dukes?
jean shorts, and it's just hilarious. It cracks me up. Like
Cutoffs?
we were, and like most of the places we go, it's like totally not a big deal. Like it's laid back, whatever. But like there have been times where we've gone a couple places like, hey, like you can't wear jean shorts and you got to wear a shirt with a collar. Like, okay, like it's otherwise like they'll literally kick you off the course
Yep.
if you don't. So you have to wear this.
Exactly. Golf is not known for being inclusive just about in any way, but for those of you who love it and are good at it, Godspeed to you. And speaking of things that we're not good at, I think it's about time that we wrap this episode up, my man. A good hour. Like we had a lot
Yeah.
of topics on here that you and I were both like, we surprisingly have a lot to say about this. And the sports world is always turning. And so we're going to try to be more regular about this. And hopefully now it'll be 2 weeks instead of 4 weeks between an episode. We'll just kind of continue paring it down. And the sports world has a lot to say. I will tell you, if you have something you want to hear about from us, you can call the number that's on the screen, 703-718-6314. Give us your take, text us, call us. If you're listening in audio, you can call or text that number as well. You can get in touch with us on social media platforms. If you've been following us, you know how to find us, but just look up INC Sports, look up Iceman and Coach, you will find us. We love to hear from people who actually listen. And if there's something you want to hear from us about, we are more than willing to talk about it. But Brad, is there anything else you'd like to say to your dad who is on here right now?
It's first of all, it's great to be back in the saddle, doing a little Iceman and Coach. Like you said, we'll get more regular about it. I do think, we probably do have a Braves talk that's due sometime in the near future. I think it'd be fun to get one of those in. There's some things to talk about there. And then, you mentioned we love hearing from people who like actually listen. But my favorites are the keyboard warriors who come in with their comments after listening to like 30 seconds of a 5-minute clip. And it's like, man, if you just would have listened for the rest of the other 4 minutes and 30 seconds, like you would have like gotten like some more context and probably would have never had to make this comment. But
I love those
it
people.
cracks me up. It's funny. And we all do it, right? I mean, we all think it. Not all of us do it. We all have
Correct.
those moments where we have the thoughts in our head, but most of us cut them off and hit the brakes before we start typing. But you know what? The world needs people like that. The world needs people like that for sure. So nope, I love it, man. Glad to be doing it again. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks everybody for listening and for your continued support.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you very, very soon, hopefully. But as always, I hope this finds everybody well, safe, and all of that good stuff. Brad, it's always fun to see you. And to everybody else, we'll talk to you next time. This is Iceman and Coach.